Welcome back to Awakened Exchanges. I'm your host, Jay Rich, and I'm recording this the weekend after I was at Oregon Hemp Fest, which we sponsored with Awakened Vapes. We've had 2 weeks off, and I haven't touched my computer at all in that time. I've actually been doing my best to keep my spirits up, though it's getting harder and harder as of late. Guests have been harder to come by as well, and I'm not quite sure why or what direction to really go with the podcast right now. I'm going to get into that a little bit more later, since this episode is going to be what it's going to be. But I truly want to thank you again for joining us here on The Exchange. You really do help keep my energy up and things moving forward. Please remember that if you have any suggestions for topics or guests, I do listen to the listeners, so please email me from our website. And that stays true despite the rest of the content that's going to go on with this episode. And you can, of course, still contact me on Twitter at Awaken Exchanges. I hope that you're as excited to be here as I am to be back with you today. So this week's episode is going to be a shorter one, in part because we're back in the middle of another heat wave, but also because like I said just earlier, I haven't had a lot of luck getting guests to commit to an actual schedule lately. I know that it's summer and that people are busy doing a lot of things, especially as they're trying to ignore COVID and get back into some semblance of normality, which we haven't had for a year and a half now. I know that everyone has been cooped up and, they want to have some sort of a life while they can, but I definitely worry a bit now, especially as COVID cases are predictably surging, up over 64,000, I think, just recently. And we seem to be ramping up for another round of hospitalizations and deaths this fall and winter. I hope that we don't end up having to deal with the lockdowns and restrictions of 2020 for 2022, but I'm not sure what other options there are going to be. Maybe people will start to really listen to Bret Weinstein and the doctors he's been having on his shows to talk about Ivermectin and Covid prevention. It took more than a year for people to take him seriously about the lab leak hypothesis, but that is the most likely scenario that seems to be going around these days about how it got out. Again, I'm not trying to say that it was intentionally leaked. I think accidents happen, especially with a facility whose protocols have shown to be lax in the last few years even. So it's kind of crazy to think about when saying the lab leak hypothesis would have gotten you kicked off of most platforms just a few months ago, that it's the most likely scenario, but it does seem to be so. So don't worry about me going too in-depth about that, though. I'm going to spend most of this episode talking about the future of this podcast and, of course, Awakened Vapes. The reason I started this show in the first place was for Awakened Vapes and to promote cannabis health. But maybe it's time to dive a little deeper and be vulnerable again myself. However, before we get into the show, here's a brief rundown of our sponsors. First off, I want to thank all of you personally for your support. Just listening and sharing this podcast with your friends gives me a reason to keep providing the best content that I can. If you have the means and would like to contribute personally, please take a look at our Patreon page, where you will get access to exclusive content and deals. And as for our other sponsors, Awakened Vapes was the first of the Awakened brands and has been helping you modulate your high with CBD-only, high-terpene vape products since 2019. And Genesis Pharms has been making the highest quality medicinal RSO among many other fantastic products, starting with the medical community back before 2010. And last but definitely not least, the Caramel Corn Company, bringing you caramel corn the way it's meant to be. And remember, if you enjoy this podcast, please follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube, or follow us wherever else you're listening. And if you can, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I know every podcast says that, but it's because it really does help spread the word. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. All right, now stay tuned, and thank you for listening to Awakened Exchanges. Genesis Pharms was founded on the belief in cannabis's ability to heal. Genesis Pharms is more than a brand. They're a compassionate community of like-minded individuals that generate top-quality cannabis products made with love and care. Community outreach is always on their mind, and their partnerships with Grow for Vets and Parents for Pot was just a beginning to what they hope to accomplish in the coming years. You can find their products on the best dispensary shelves across the state of Oregon. Their RSO is the most consistent quality in the state. Their tinctures are second to none, and their personal massage oil will have you and your partner both coming back for more. Find them on Facebook and Instagram and ask for them in your local dispensary today. Don't forget to listen to Sean's interview here on Awakened Exchanges. It's episode number 3. The Caramel Corn Company is bringing you caramel corn the way it was meant to be, made with premium ingredients in small, handcrafted batches and completely gluten-free. The flavors include original, roasted cashew, salted almond, mixed nut, spicy sriracha, white morsel macadamia, peanut butter, butterscotch, and my personal favorites, chocolate drizzle and raspberry caramel apple. I can't say enough about how delicious this caramel corn is. It makes a great gift any time of the year. You can find them on sale in Portland area Market of Choice locations and online again here real soon. Visit caramelcorncompany.com for more information today. Remember, buying local supports small businesses and keeps your money building your community. And last but not least, Awakened Vapes has been bringing you some of the highest quality CBD vape cartridges since ringing in the new year in 2019. I became passionate about cannabis after a car wreck left me with major migraines, and no prescribed pills helped alleviate any of the symptoms. Having only tried cannabis a handful of times in high school and college, it was a doctor's recommendation that led me to give cannabis another try. Only then did I realize that we'd all been at least a little misled about the health benefits of this amazing plant. Despite the unexpected break because of the vape ban and then a global health crisis, the business is stronger than ever, and we invite you to check out our updated website today. We are still offering our 3 varieties with new improved terpene formulations and enhanced flavor to go along with the custom blended terpene effect profiles. Check back at awakenedvapes.com for any updates. You can always email us about wholesaling or white labeling opportunities as well. Welcome back to Awakened Exchanges. We've had 2 weeks off, and it looks like we're going to be dark for a little while longer. I don't want this to be goodbye, but it is going to be a hiatus of an undetermined length. I know this is coming off some fairly popular episodes, especially with the Psychic Babe just 2 weeks ago. But here's a little bit more about what's going on. As you know, I started this podcast in large part to help promote Awakened Vapes and to help get some cannabis education out there. We've taken some deviations in topics, following what's been interesting and presenting itself at the time, but it got harder and harder to lock in guests as of late. And on top of that, while the podcast has helped drive some limited traffic to the Awakened Vapes site, the Awakened Exchanges site has stayed more popular between the two of them. And while that traffic was driven to the site, it hasn't actually resulted in any additional sales, really. And as for the sponsors of this podcast, well, they're friends of the podcast, and they don't actually pay for the privilege of sponsoring this podcast. I do it because I'm promoting people who I actually believe in. So this podcast has actually been costing me money each month, not just the time and effort that goes into producing and recording and editing and uploading and updating the websites, but all of that takes up my own time, but there's actually money involved each month as well. That's just been coming out of my pocket. The next factor is that I've been basically living off of my savings and what meager vape sales there have been since last October. I told you I was going to get a little vulnerable, so I'm starting to run a little low on funds, and decisions are having to be made with that in mind. There has been some promising movement on the distributor front, with at least 2 that have shown some reasonable amount of interest, but even that would mean significantly less profit per cartridge, and it may not be sustainable in the long run, as their price points don't really pay me a salary as much as get the name and product out there. So I guess this is where I should mention yet again that I have a background in IT and operations management, specifically in the cannabis industry since 2016, and I have extensive experience with metric. So if you know anyone that might be in need of that skill set, please feel free to contact me. You can email me via the website, or there's the other Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter ways to contact me that I mention each week as well. I am basically using that to tell you that I'm going to have to look for some more steady work for a little while. As much as I love this podcast and these exchanges that I get to have and sharing this information with you all, unfortunately, we all have to pay our bills as well, right? Well, all of that said, the vape cartridges are still in local area stores and may get into more stores throughout Washington and Oregon soon, as well as maybe some of the other surrounding states, but we'll see. Please do feel free to check out the website and order through there, where we ship them directly to your door. I'm going to be spending some more concentrated time getting my supply of cartridges up and ready for distribution, as well as looking for that day job to get me by in the meantime. What does that mean for the podcast? Well, it means that I don't know when the next episode is going to come out. I managed to maintain weekly releases for 8 months and then had these last 2 weeks off, but my time and energy is just spread too thin at the moment to keep it going, as well as everything else that needs to go in my life. So if I'm able to book an interesting guest or 2 on occasion, or maybe come up with a good one-off topic, I might try and release some sporadic episodes. But I know that doesn't really keep listeners happy, which was, one of my main goals, is to build a community here. I truly enjoy talking with interesting people and spreading interesting information. So I hope that you have all enjoyed that as much as I have, and that we're able to figure that out in the future so that Awakened Exchanges can come out of hibernation and continue to spread the good word of cannabis. Now that all of those details are out there, I just wanted to take this last little section to say how grateful I am for all of the listeners that have stuck with me through all of the random topics and actually helped this podcast grow into one with a fairly successful listenership. I don't think I can say it enough, but I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I hope to share some future exchanges with you again soon. My email is still open, and as always, I do listen to the listeners. So feel free to check in personally. I hope to hear from you soon. And so long for now. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Exchange. This isn't goodbye, but rather so long for now. I hope that the future leads us to many more exchanges and much more cannabis health. Now, I want to give a special thanks to all of our listeners. You are the reason I made this podcast and these vapes. Please tell your friends about us and follow us on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube or wherever else you're listening, and please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Every podcast says that because it really does help with visibility. You can support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. And I don't know when I'll see you guys again next, but thanks again for listening to Awakened Exchanges, and have a blessed day.